Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to the CM Mentors podcast. My name is Matt Graves. My co-host each week is Kyle Grandell. What's going on, Kyle?
Hey, Matt, doing really well, man. Thanks. Really excited. We got an awesome guest this week, somebody from the owner's side. It's going to be great. It's Kathryn Mattox, comes with us from Nestlé, Senior Manager of the Capital Governance Group. I've had the pleasure of working with her in the past on some projects, and she's done a lot of great things. She's really big in speaking and mentorship, so really great fit for this program. Listening, for our listeners. Comes to us with a chemical engineering degree from the University of Dayton, and just looking forward to talking with her about the owner's side and kind of getting some thoughts there. So it's going to be
excited. I mean, she's super smart, super accomplished, but we're going to spend an hour talking about memes. So it'll be good.
No. I mean, that's right on par. I mean, that's what the listeners are here for, is the memes. So let's be real. But before we bring her on, let's talk about this week's sponsor.
Yeah, back this week is Alt CMO. Alt CMO is the go-to fractional chief marketing officer agency for the construction world. And so we do everything from building websites, SEO, paid advertising, brand development, logos, you name it, anything marketing related to construction. All of our CMOs got over 15 years of experience in construction marketing. So it's the thing to do anyway.
Heck yeah, very glad to have it. All right, let's bring her on.
Hey guys.
Hey, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
So glad to have you here, Kathryn. Really excited.
Yeah, it was funny you were talking about you were mentioning that you guys for CMO do all the marketing and anything related to images and stuff. And I was just sharing before we got on live about how Copilot, the Microsoft tool that can create images shows bias, right? I was trying to create one for my own presentation with women in a construction management environment, and I struggled to get it to automatically generate one. So hopefully you hire this company and you will have much better luck than I did doing it on my own.
Yeah, we all kind of dabbling in the AI world too, but yeah, it's tough to, especially image generation, it's tough to get it to do anything you want to. Or if you get it to where, and I use ChatGPT mostly, and it uses Dolly, and you can go in there, it'll make a picture, and they've updated it because you can actually go in there now, say highlight one area and change this one area, but it's still just like completely like misses the boat when you started doing those like minor changes. So
yeah, and we had a training on it this past April when I went to a leadership and engineering training course in Switzerland, and it was one of the pre-work courses that we took, and it was about how to better like talk to the ChatGPT. And I was like, oh, I didn't know that. I was like, literally at that point, I had been using it as like a Grammarly app, basically. Like, check the grammar, make it shorter, highlight 3 key points. Like, that's all I was using it for. And they did a good training for us at Nestlé to how to use it better. I'm still learning myself, obviously, because I couldn't get gender balance to show up, but I'm still blaming that one on bias more than user error.
It's all about how you write the prompt. And
exactly.
I feel like I'm probably better than the average person, but I still struggle with it all the time.
Of course, you're better than the average person. You're an engineer. This is like,
I mean, just the average. I mean, just because I played with it a lot. Just the average person who probably just picked it up once or twice. But yeah.
Yeah, just joking.
Sounds great. Well, Kathryn, I mean, I've worked with you in the past. Known you for quite a while now, but I know that maybe Matt and some of the listeners don't. Would you mind giving us kind of your version of your background and what brings you here today? And introduce yourself to us.
Man, you start getting into that year 40, and like people ask you to like talk about like your background. You're like, like I'm that old person who has like a really long story, and no one will be focused by the time I'm done. So I'll try and make it short. I started out chemical engineering degree from the University of Dayton, as he mentioned. I then worked for Proctor Gamble for almost 4 years, and then I worked ending on the Tide Pod project, which was really exciting. And then I went to work for Kraft, mainly in the planters business. Then after Kraft Heinz happened, so I was there for the merger and takeover from 3G. And after that happened, I was actually over ready to drink beverage as well as all the planters factories. So I had like 8 factories that I was trying to do. Side note, I also had like an 8-month-old baby that so I lasted 9 months after that and realized I don't want to be at this company anymore because they let go of like my best girlfriend that was in the office or whatever. We both had kids and all that. She got let go right before Thanksgiving. So I was like, put my resume. I'm gonna go Google, but I have a blended family, so my bonus kids at the time were still young enough that we didn't want to relocate out of the area. So that's how I found Nestlé, because it was right across town from where I was working here in Fort Smith, Arkansas. So I went to work for Nestle with the Gerber brand, which was a really exciting time. I tell you what, you want to talk about being at the right, like with a brand that you're really identifying with at the time. I had, my son, like I said, he was 8, 9 months old. Well, I can't remember exactly how old he was when I started there, but not that point, right? Like he was definitely a Gerber consumer, and I was definitely in that phase of life. And so it was awesome to work on products that I really connected with. And then actually, I've loved all the brands I've been a part of. But anyways, after that, I got a chance to go out to Tulare, California, and be a factory engineering manager with Nestle, which was a huge honor, and it was a huge career goal of mine to do that before I was 35, and I was 34 when I got the job, right, turning into 35. So tick goal achieved. And I was out there, and then Fernary took over Nestle divested, I think is the right word. The ice cream business. And again, I'm not speaking for Nestle, so I'm just giving my summary, but they divested, I think is the right term, the ice cream business, or sold it. And Fernary took over. So I was there for a year after that. And then I got a phone call like, do you want to come back to Nestle? And I was like, I don't know. Like, do I have a choice? Like, where am I going? And it was like, yeah, you have a choice. But your job's going to change a lot if you stay in this current role, because our company's changing a lot. We don't think you're going to like it as much. And I was like, really? Okay. And they're like, you'll find Vernon is at the time he still is outgoing VP of engineering at Nestle. And so he calls me and he's like, are you ready to come back to Nestle? And I was like, absolutely. But I can't travel all the time and I can't all this. And he's like, I just had the same exact thought, like, because I have a special needs. She's now 11. And then I have, he is 9 and then a 7-year-old girl. So I had 3 children. This was back in 2020. So they were 2019. So they were younger. And I was like, I can't travel all the time. Like, yeah, I just can't. Like, I was like, I wasn't going to ask you about salary. I was so excited to go back to Nestle. I wasn't going to ask you about salary. I wasn't going to ask you about job title. Like, none of it matters to me. I just can't be on the road all the time. And he was like, okay, well, here's the deal. I want you to think about 4 locations. I want you to think about Wisconsin. I want you to think about Solon, Ohio. I want you to think about Jonesboro, Arkansas. And I want you to think about Gaffney. And so I went home, talked to my husband, and I'm like, here are our choices. What do you think? Knew nothing about the projects that were, or my roles that were going to be on that project, right? And surprisingly, to everybody's surprise, my husband picked Gaffney, South Carolina. And so that's how I met Kyle. We got to work together on a $60 million expansion of the factory there and putting in a whole new packaging line. And it was the height of COVID. So it was like, felt like the pressure of like, we got to get enough product on the shelves or people are going to starve was like on your shoulders. And it was just a really intense, amazing project that we got an opportunity to be a part of. And then after that, I went out to Utah, took a quick blip as a factory engineering manager before 6 months in the role before I was able to become a capital manager for the foods business, which meant $150 million, $130 million range of projects over 8 factories. And I supported the director of engineering, was kind of his right-hand person to help support the factories, make sure they knew what they were doing. Their individual envelope could be anything from 60 million to 10 million to, even less, just depending on the year and what was going on. And just supporting and training and teaching those project management skills, and really enjoyed that job. And then we went through an organizational structure, and I got an opportunity to apply for a couple different jobs and ended up in the senior manager capital governance role. So for listeners might be like, what is that? Good question. It's new to Nestle. I don't know if that job title exists anywhere else. But what that means for me at Nestle is I have a group of 5 amazing engineers working for me, and we are trying to create better systems and processes so that the capital envelope that we invest every year at Nestle USA, so Nestle is Purina has a separate capital envelope, but Nestle USA, which includes brands like Lean Cuisine, Stouffer's, all our beverage stuff, all our Coffee Mate, like Nesquik, all our big brands, all the factories. So that huge capital envelope, I have 5 engineers, and we help the engineers who are resourced to those individual projects, doing those expansions, doing whatever the projects are. Do they have the right tools, to have the right governance, to have the right, so that they can feel successful and spend money the way we would all want to spend money. So that's my current job. I've been in it since basically the 1st of February. And loving it. So that's too long because, like I said, I'm 40 now. So then my history takes, I don't know, what was that, 7 minutes?
I'm not quite 40 yet. We'll never get my bio. I'm like, yeah, I built a few buildings and now I'm here. Like,
there might be a gender analogy in that whole thing. Like I talked for 17 minutes and you're like, yeah, I built a few buildings. There might be a communication style bias in there.
It could be.
So, Kathryn, you certainly had a lot of different roles in your career, and I mean, fantastic things too. There's some awesome progression there. It sounds like you're really enjoying your latest one too. So that's fantastic. And then, but you've also been really involved with some national women's programs as well, and starting a few. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Oh, I'd love to talk about that. And again, timer. Okay. In 2018, I was factory engineering manager. Again, it was an objective of mine to be that. And I had women working for me who, were still experiencing bias, not necessarily internal to the company, but I had a female construction manager, or not construction manager, maintenance manager who worked for me. Her name would be in the emails, and she was trying to follow up with vendors and trying to follow up with these major equipment manufacturers. And they would be like, can you please connect us to an engineer, not a billing clerk? And she would be like, I'm the maintenance manager. And I remember one time, I won't mention the company, but it was a pretty large equipment manufacturer that we used in the business. And they came, and she's messaging me because we were having a service performance issue. And so they're sitting in her office, and she's texting me, and she's like, hey, can you come and give me some assistance with so-and-so? And I'm like, sure, but not, I mean, she went on to Harvard, by the way, and she's like amazing career individual, right? So speaks multiple languages. Like, we're not talking about, this is the sharpest crayon in the box, not the other way around. And I'm like, yeah, I'll be right there, and I come in, and he like barely shakes my hand and is like, I was looking for her manager. I really need to talk to somebody in charge around here. And I was like, oh, well, I'm the factory engineering manager. I make, all the final decisions on the purchasing of our equipment services. I said, would you like me to get the vice president of operations, who is also a female, or how about the president of the business, who's also a female? Which one of those would you like to talk to today? And of course, he's turned into like a stuttering robot. I don't. Well, I mean, you misunderstood me, and it's like, I didn't misunderstand you. So anyways, there was just like, I mean, that in industry happens a ton, right? I've been called, I remember one time I was on a $6 million project at one of the previous companies I worked for. And I walked out, and they were doing something wrong with the way they were running electrical. And I don't speak Sparky. That's what I say, because I don't get into electrical. Kyle knows this. Like, draw it out for me, remind me which order these things go in. Like, I can figure it out once we put it out on paper, but I just don't, it's not my natural language. But I knew they were running that conduit wrong. And so I come out, and I'm like saying something to the guy running the conduit. And I'm like, because it's sanitary design, it was one of the food companies, so it's sanitary design. And I was like, I just know that was wrong. And I knew it was also not in the drawings. And so I was like trying to I was trying to do all the nice leadership ways, like, hey, tell me what you're working on, like, what's going on, blah, blah, and like barely could get a response. And then I started to get annoyed, because I'm like, okay, I played nice. Now I'm not going to play nice anymore. And he was like, and so he was like, I was like, I guess we're going to have to go get your foreman. Where's your foreman? And as he's like stepping down off the ladder, he's like, what is it? Take your daughter to work day? And I was like, and like right then is when his foreman walked up and was like smacking him. He's like, that's the project manager. It's like, yeah, I'm the one who wrote the POs. Like, would you like to say that again? So it's consistent throughout my experience in industry. Those are just two stories. And so 2018, there was somewhat of a women engineering program at Nestlé, but it was much smaller. Like, I'm talking, I went to an event in early 2018, and there was 30 women at the event. And afterwards, 8 of us were like, we're so thirsty for this. Like, we need this. Like, we need a community. We need something. We need the support. Like, and a lot of us were a lot of them were actually younger than me. So I found myself being in the room of like the 20s, and I was in my 30s. Right. And I was like, man, I thought I had gotten better, and what I was hearing is like, it's still hard. And so we, as a team, started a women engineering leadership team. And we started a program and got involved. By the time I stopped being the leader of it in 2022, it was up to 850 reaches each month.
Wow.
And then in 2021, I started a Women in Manufacturing because we felt like the needs were different from an engineering perspective versus a manufacturing experience. So we started a Women in Manufacturing organization. And it went from the first kickoff I did, we had 8 factories there. And this year, they had every single Nestlé USA factory represented at their conference. So very, very cool. And I think what I enjoy most is, like I said, I stepped off being the leader of it in 2022 just because I had done 4 years, and I think there's a reason that there's term limits or should at least president term limits. So I stepped down, and because I knew the team could do it. I was tired too, to be honest with you, very tired of pushing against a wall that didn't feel like it was going to move. Not at Nestle, just in industry in general, in our society. And but now to watch those women, I get to mentor some of the leaders of it now and connect with them on a monthly basis, and just seeing them progress in their careers and taking it to a level that I probably couldn't have taken it to because I was done and tired. And so that's the super long story of the women engineering work and women in manufacturing work at Nestle. And I'll say this, because I will say this for Nestle, is when we're leading that team, we say that we want to make Nestle the place that women want to work, and specifically engineers want to work. And that's my dream, is that we started sponsoring Society of Women Engineers conferences and things. And that's my vision, is that one day the CEO of Nestle, she's going to say, I heard an inspiring speech at a women engineering conference. And so last year, we actually had our head of procurement, who was an engineer but had gotten into procurement and whatever. She was one of the closing speakers at the Society of Women Engineers conference. And so like full circle moment. And I just remember looking around the crowd like, all right, which one of you is the next, which one of you is the future Nestle CEO? Because this is my dream right here happening. But yeah, so that's it.
That's awesome. You do with all the mentorship and stuff you do. That's like perfectly in line with like what our goal with this is, right? Especially for kind of the next generation coming in, and for people 100%. That are kind of coming into the industry, maybe second career, that sort of stuff. But there's a pretty good woman following that we've found through all this. So what's your advice to somebody who's maybe starting out and they're first time encountering like the take your daughter to work comments and that sort of stuff that you're talking about?
So a couple of things I would say is the best advice I ever got, which I wish I would have gotten earlier in my career, was prepare your response. And prepare your response. And do not be afraid to draw that line, because most times people are testing their limit. So when you don't draw that line and you're like, oh, you try to laugh it off, you try to be cool, you try to be one of the guys, you try to whatever, you've instantly set your standard there. Same thing we would talk about, right, when we talk about walking a job site with contractors. If you walk by something and you accept it, that's your new standard. Yep. And so for women who are on a job site, you're in a manufacturing environment, I don't care what you're in, set your boundary and hold to it. Humor, I like to use humor, right? So somebody once said this is like, oh, ha ha ha. I wonder what HR is going to think when we talk to them about that, and try and be funny, but also like put the point in there, right? That's not appropriate, just depending on what the comment is. But have some canned responses, even if it's just practicing saying, I don't find that funny. I don't find it funny. Right? I can't tell you how many situations I've been in where I've laughed. King Dick Tools is a tool company, and I've had a mechanic like in front of other mechanics say, can you hold my dick and hand me a tool? It's a gasket thing that puts gaskets in. And I was just like, I had no, like, everyone else kind of like laughing, like not sure. They're all watching how I'm going to respond. Right. It was mortifying, because I'm in this position of, do I laugh and be cool, or do I set my boundary? And it's just back to high school. I'm sure we all had that in high school, right? Like it's just, it puts you right back in that elementary like phase. And that sucks as like a 10-year at that time, I think I was 12 years into my career, and I was put back into like feeling like I was in elementary school. That sucks. For women, I have felt, I can't speak for all women, obviously, I don't want to. But for me, I always felt like I had 2 tracks. I could be the smartest, or I could be the friendliest. And I always felt like it was one or the other. And that sucks too, because you're either overworking yourself to try and I can't tell you how many times I've watched things just trying to get ready for work, because I didn't grow up being like, here, let's come run this tractor with me. Hey, let's come change this timing belt on the car. I didn't grow up like, here, let me show you how to change a tire. I have a mechanical mind. Chemical engineering was easier for me because chemistry was really easy for me. I say that I don't have a mechanical mind, but it's just because I haven't been growing. I haven't been working on that part of my brain since I was, a kid. I didn't play with Legos. Not that my parents didn't want me to, or, my dad's has 3 engineering degrees. So, he did involve me in STEM stuff as that became more of a thing. He did take his daughter to work, by the way. So that's how I did get exposed to engineering. But my point is, just back to the point, for younger women, or it doesn't even matter what age, if you're in an environment, just set your boundaries and be okay with that. You don't have to be a people pleaser. You do not have to accept anything. And if they have a problem with it, they're probably, not who you want to partner with anyways. I say one of my things that I read all the time, Kyle and I were, we bonded over this, is like, we're kind of junkies for information and like podcasts, and we like books and all that stuff. So I'm sure that this is not a Kathryn original quote. I'm sure I would plagiarize it from somebody. But one of the things I do repeat a lot is, you're known by who your friends are, but you're also known by who considers you an enemy. And what I mean by that is, if people are going to be like, wow, she really is a butterface, which I've been called on a job site. Wow, she really is just the 3B. And I won't say what 3B is, but 2 body parts and the B word. Those are other terms I've been called, right? Like, being the nicest person, or also studying so hard. So I was like looking up different like rigging information. This was before YouTube was so handy, right? Because this was back in 2009, and I'm trying to like do all this researching. I guess it was 2010, and YouTube obviously was around, but I'm just saying it wasn't quite as user friendly. And so I'm like doing all this research. None of that protected me from those interactions at all. In fact, I would even say maybe made it worse, because I was more threatening at times, right? And I tried so hard to do all my homework. Like, I know what I'm talking about. I promise. I'm not an idiot, so just hold your boundaries. Know that if you're a woman in engineering or in STEM in general, you're already at the top % of your, so you're already amazing, and you don't have to prove it every day. That'd be my advice.
Have you felt like the industry's changed in that manner from like 2009 to 15 later, 2024? Has it got better, worse, the same?
Have you seen the Barbie movie?
No.
Okay.
It was not on my watch list.
Well, I highly recommend you put it on your watch list. There's an amazing scene in there, and it is not anti-male or whatever. It actually makes a joke about feminists, how the feminist movement was held back because of women arguing with other women, but they do it on the patriarchate movement. And there's a scene in there where Ken is trying to figure out like the real world, and he's like, I heard about patriarchy. Patriarchy is amazing. Like, how come, and he's like, so you guys aren't, and he's trying to get a job, and the man is like, do you have your master's? And he's like, no. He's like, do you have your PhD? He's like, actually, a lot of our people, blah, blah. And he's like, I don't have any of those things. I thought you guys were doing patriarchy. And the guy was like, we're doing it. We're just doing it on the low key, right? That line is so funny for a reason, right? Is what I would say. We have, in my opinion, alienated each other, just like we're doing all across the world in all types of things, in politics, in religion, and everything else, as we have bought the lie that we're so different that we can't complement each other. And that's the lie. We're so different for a reason. And I don't want women to be, some target, and then everyone looks at me and says, oh, did she get that job because she's a diversity? I don't want that. That's horrible. I graduated top of my class. And now all of a sudden I'm downgraded because and also fun thing, I have gray hair. You can't see it on the podcast. I have gray hair. But a lot of times I'll say, I've been with Nestlé. When I worked with Kyle, if I would say to somebody, I've been with Nestlé 6 years or 5 years. They assumed I was 5 years out of school. And I was like, no. I look young. Men can hide that with a 5 o'clock shadow. If I had a 5 o'clock shadow, we'd have a whole other level of bias going on right now. So luckily I do not. But, it's like it's a kind of a trap. And again, I think it's not because society isn't trying. I think it's because we have such extremes that everybody's pushing against the extremes. And that's the problem. It's about, and I want to change the narrative. If I get involved in this again, which I don't think I'm going to, but if I get involved again in that kind of advocacy, I would really advocate, instead of using the word gender balance, we need to use the word gender intelligence, because there is a balance, that's true, but there's also an intelligence of team design and what is the right design for a team based on the activity. Because if it's hauling concrete, that might be a different gender intelligence than if we're designing a new product line that women are going to use. Right? That's a different gender intelligence that you want designing that product. If it's a feminine product, for example, you don't want 10 men and 2 women in that room, right? But I'm okay with like, hey, we're hiring a construction crew to fill in X 30,000 square feet of concrete, whatever it was, how many trucks that was, Kyle, that we hauled in there. I'm okay saying that team's going to be 100% men, and I'm not going to get bent out of shape about that, right? So it's about using our intelligence and recognizing our own bias too, right? Like, I didn't watch the Barbie movie until about 6 months ago, because in my social circles it was like, oh, that's a feminist movie, like it's so anti-masculating or whatever. And I watched it and it was like, whoever I read that post about totally missed the point that it's actually also making a joke about feminist movement. So highly recommend it. I'm not paid by the Barbie movie. I should just say that right now.
This segment sponsored by Barbie.
As I realized this morning, because they didn't have essential water, I grabbed a bank water, and I was like, I better rip this label off right now. Like, I'm not drinking. I'm on this podcast, not even drinking my own company's products.
That's why we have editing. So, Kathryn, just to kind of move away from the gender specific part of things a little bit. But the last conversation was a really good lead in. So I know there's a lot of illusions sometimes that managers need to know everything about a job site or a role before they take it. And, do you have experience with that in your role? And what kind of advice can you give about, that illusion that you need to know everything before you really jump in feet first or head first or whatever the phrase is in the first place? So
jump into the deep end, whatever you want to say. Yeah, right. So many colloquialisms, and as we all get to work across the country, it's so interesting, the different phrases people use to describe this, almost the same thing. Great question. I love it. So I will say, though, statistically, women are more likely to not only apply to roles that they meet more of the qualifications than men. That's been, that's a national study. But in general, I think it's also the younger generation who is, my son is 9 years old, and he said this to me the other day. I'm teaching my grandkids. Yes, I have 3 on the way, a 3rd grandson. So I have 2 grandsons who are both over the age of 3. And so that's the perfect swimming age. I taught swimming lessons to kids when I was in high school. And so I've been teaching them swimming lessons in the pool, and which is making my kids feel like I didn't teach them how to swim. They're like, you never taught us. And I was like, oh, I totally Karate Kid taught you guys, wax on, wax off. Like, you just didn't know I was teaching you how to swim. But, and again, that's a older person reference, not the new Karate Kid, old one. Anyways, squirrel. So back to the swimming lessons, and I started like seeing stuff that I wanted to snip and show my son about, like how to do the breathing technique to rotate your head. And I was like, Luke, I've been saving these videos. I want to show you this swimming like practice and how they were teaching these kids. And he goes, I don't want to watch swimming, because he's starting to get really good and he's really strong. And I'm like, you could be like a good swimmer. And his dad's 6'5" and I'm 5'10". So like, he also has probably heights in his genes, right? I was like, you should watch these YouTube videos. It's really cool. And he says to me again, remember, he's 9. He says, I don't like watching videos of stuff that I'm going to try and do because I already feel like I'm not good. Okay, mama heart just broke into 1,000 pieces, right? But from what I read about parenting, and I try and read at least one parenting book per year, what I read about parenting in this new generation is that's very common, is that actually the exposure to all of the all the possibilities is actually causing kids to not take the leap of faith because they see what perfection looks like. Yeah. And so I think that is very applicable to people. You know, we see the highlight reel. We see people at the 20-year of their career. We don't necessarily see people who are struggling to figure out what the heck is this crane versus that crane. What does that mean? Like, how do I do a crane plan? You know, oh my gosh, are people going to die if I don't rig this the right way? You know, and so what I would say is the only way I've gotten through that in my career is to trust my instincts, trust but verify, and find the right team to put around you, right? So having the right construction manager early on your project, I cannot tell you how important it is. And no, I'm not being paid or financially reimbursed for this at all. But I cannot tell you, especially as a new engineer, getting a somewhat senior, but not somebody who's going to try and make you feel bad about yourself because you don't know what you're doing, but getting somebody who's been, you know, who's further along in the career than you, take the humble pie, be willing to be taught by them, come at it from like, teach me, right? Not, I know a little bit and I'm going to prove myself to you. Come at it from, hey, I read this and I want to learn all about it. That is the way I have kind of gotten through that, I guess. And I would say I am still definitely kind of falling on the career path of jack of all trades, master of none. Like there's very capital processes and capital project management would probably be my only little bit of mastering that I'm doing, building in my career. More, I've just been all over the place. So I'm just getting little bits of everything, which has just been a lot of fun. So yeah, just to answer your question, try not to be afraid, but also realize that's kind of becoming the new normal. And putting the right people around you and trusting your gut to what those look like and who those people are. That's just the critical thing.
Yeah, well, and that's really important too. It obviously doesn't apply just to construction either. Is that even on the business side, you see movies about people being successful athletes or starting businesses, being entrepreneurs, and you see how successful they are, and you think about, well, how am I possibly going to get to that level? Well, you got to start if you want to, and not everybody.
One decision at a time. Yeah, one decision at a time.
Mm-hmm. Not everybody is going to be the professional athlete who gets talked about on the news, but you know what? That's okay. You can still have a great life and make a good living.
Great time. You can still have fun.
Yeah, right.
Yes. I like to have fun. When Kyle and I were doing the job site, we had the partner we were with was having some safety issues, to say lightly, right? And I had never been on a major industrial construction project before this. I mean, the most I had done is a $60 million line or $6 million line installs. I had never built a building. I mean, I was so in over my head, but it was okay. I had a good team around me. But I'm seeing things that are just making me feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to have a fatality. And I'm going to be known as the new project manager with a fatality. Like that's how I was feeling. And we did this great exercise, leadership through safety, and where we like lead from the heart. And we defined like what is our why? Simon Sinek, Lead from the Why, great book. Mm-hmm. But what is our why? And one of them clearly was we want to have fun. Like we get to build stuff. We get to spend other people's money. Like let's just remind ourselves of the kids who wanted to play with Legos. I think on one of your podcasts, and I don't know, Matt, who said it, but I think one of your podcasts is like, it really scratches the itch of the Navy SEAL in me. Like that it's like, has to be so planned out, so intense. Right. And for me, like it scratches the imagination itch. If you look at it the right way, like we're going to get to build a building that's going to be around here for 100 years. It's going to create thousands of jobs and billions of meals. And that's what I would tell the construction crews is like, that's what I want this to be known for. Please, keep yourself safe, because it's not going to matter if like I look at this building at the end and I see, somebody whose foot got crushed, because they didn't have the right rigging, or they didn't have the right steel toes on, or, whatever it could be. I mean, that was the stuff that really kept me awake at night. And having a great safety manager that we brought on, again, I brought him on too late because I was worried about budget. And I wish I would have there a lot sooner, but I did have good construction manager partners, so we made it. But again, back to having the right team around you. Mm-hmm. Not sure how I ran on that down that track, but I'm not sure if I answered the question, so sorry about that.
I like the point though about making it fun, because like I got little kids that are kind of similar age to yours. I got 6-year-old twin boys, and they're starting to play sports. They're doing baseball and basketball and that sort of stuff, and it's like I remember being this way when I was a kid, but it's just all about winning. Like all the coaches, I'm assistant coach on all the teams and all this, but like our head coaches are all like, want to win, 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 win. We got to win the championship. I'm
Really?
like it's baseball. Like it's the first year of machine pitch baseball. Like they don't even know how you score a run. Like they don't even know what a point is. Like one day,
Right.
like they're talking about like we're gonna win the championship, and I was like, they don't even know. And I asked them, I was like, ask the kids, like, how do you get a run? And they're like, what's a run? Like, okay, how do you score a point? And like, you get it out. I'm like, and I told the coach, I'm like, see, they don't like. Let's
Yeah.
just worry about
The fundamentals.
the
Yeah.
fundamentals of the game, about
Yeah,
having
that's actually
fun.
surprising to me though, because like I feel like we've in some of our kid programs we're swinging the other way. Like again, back to the extremes. It's like you're either in
Mm-hmm.
sports and it's like travel ball and it's super
Yeah.
intense, or it's like everybody's a winner. Here's your like participation trophy, and it's like it's almost like the two extremes. When my kids get like all these awards, I feel like every week they're bringing home like best in the class for this kind of
Mm-hmm.
characteristic and all this, and like here's a piece of candy for this, and here's your dojo points for this, and
Dojo
I'm like,
points.
you do realize like that's not the real world. Like granted, I try and be we do really good job at rewards and recognition at my company, but
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we're setting our kids up for a little bit of a rude awakening. But so it's interesting that you've had the almost opposite experience. But back to your point about the fundamentals, I do want to kind of comment on that. That's something that I was talking to somebody about recently. Is we in industry, it feels like, and I think it's the same in construction management. Would love your guys' perspective on this, but it feels like we have this gap of competency because we either have people who are super experienced, but they don't know new ways of working, and they don't know like all the hacks that like some of the younger generations know, right? Like how to utilize technology the best, but they have all that senior experience, not always the best teachers, which is frustrating. But and then you have this like younger generation who's really, really trying, but just doesn't have. There's like not like there's this like hard. There's this really gap in the sweet spot. Um, and I think we were tolerating it for a while, and it was okay, right? Until we started to lose the people who really were raised on fundamentals, right? Those grumpy people that were hard for a young female engineer to work with.
Mm-hmm.
However, they had fundamentals. They weren't I didn't know that they were doing the Karate Kid wax on, wax off with me at times, right? Because they weren't telling me like,
Right.
so sometimes I wasn't sure that that's what I was learning. But back to that point is like with your kid, it's like the fundamentals. And now I feel like in society, in industry, I feel like enough people have retired that practice those fundamentals over and over and over and had that value of
Mm-hmm.
understanding the fundamentals. I worry it's being replaced with people who want to do a good job, like they want to like kill it, right? Like or whatever the terms are now. Because I'm not somebody was trying to tell me like kids don't say that, and I was like, oh, I don't know. That's cringeworthy, mom. But so but the problem is we don't have the fundamentals, so we don't even realize we're missing it, right? And we don't
Yeah.
have that back to the basics. And kind of Kyle, you brought it up around they don't see the 4 a.m.s. They don't see the coming in at 2 a.m. They don't see the like 18-hour workday you had to pull a couple times, which I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure, as long as you follow OSHA rules is okay. But they don't see all that, the hustle. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know. I don't know. It's an interesting dynamic. I don't know if it's the same in construction, but that's what I'm seeing in my work life and experience is that missing that fundamentals.
I think so. I think, I mean, you can, as the older generation retires, and like,
Mm-hmm.
I think the elder millennials are the best generation out there, right? because,
Yes,
because we,
I'm dusting my shoulders off for those of you who even know what that means because that's super old as well. Um,
does
but those
anybody
of you
say that
listening,
anymore? But,
no, I did apparently.
but like that, our generation is kind of like the one that, kind of spanned the gap of like kind of
Mm-hmm.
pre-internet and then post-internet, like
Mm-hmm.
pre-technology and, post-technology. So you kind of
Yep.
have the best of both worlds, I feel like. But I work
Mm-hmm.
for a mechanical and plumbing subcontractor, and they were kind of on the leading edge of BIM modeling, 3D modeling, and
Mm-hmm.
prefabrication, all that sort of stuff.
Yep. Yep.
And their drafters, what they did was like, because unless you know the trade, it's hard to go draw it, right? And
Mm-hmm.
especially like in a 3D manner. And so they would get guys from the field that were, 40, 45, 50 years old, and, their knees were broken and they were tired of
Mm-hmm.
climbing ladders, and,
Yeah.
it's a tough
Yeah.
life. and they were wanting to do something different, and they'd bring them into the office and, hey, you're going to be a drafter. Well, they didn't know anything about these computers. They spent 20, 30 years on their tools, and
Right.
basically set them next to some kid that was 23, 25 years old that was really good with computer, didn't know anything about the industry.
Right.
And so you basically had the old dog who knew the trade,
Back to the
and
intelligence part, right?
they were
Around
both kind
that
of
was
training each other.
back to around, it's not about like, it's around the diversity of talent, the diversity of age, the diversity of experiences, and building off of each other. That's so cool.
Yeah, it was a really cool model, and it worked really well.
I tell people all the time, like, if I could go back and do it all over again, and I wasn't like feeling like this pressure to like start my career and you had to be at a certain place by a certain time or else you were a failure, like I probably would have taken a couple years off. I would have been like gone into a fabrication shop, and I would have like gone and been at that fab shop, understand drawings, understand, like, build up my mechanical prowess, I guess is a funny word that's coming to my mind. But because for me being a chemical engineer, like it makes total sense to me what's happening inside the pipe or in the transformation or the chemical transformation or the heat transfer, like all of that stuff like just clicks in my brain. But like how underneath, like how a gearbox and how the different helical, like all the different crazy, I'm not talking about just a standard gearbox reducer, but I'm talking about like the more complex ones, just like how those can actually, how I would draw that, how I would look at a drawing. Like I wish I could go back. And I recently just reconnected now that I'm back. We moved back to where my kids were born in September. And I've actually been in contact with the fabrication shop that I've worked with a lot. And I just went out there. I was like, hey, can I just come out? Like, I just want you to like show me your recent, because they started their own company. They were only like 28 years old. They're just doing fantastic here in town. And I just asked him to like show me around his shop, and he was just telling me the different pieces of equipment, what the naming was, and all that stuff. I'm like, man, I wish I could go back like and start there. But everything happens for a reason. It is what it is. And it's never too old to learn, right? That's another thing. If I had, once my kids, I have all this like list of stuff I want to do, and my kids are like, they don't want mom around anymore. Instead of like sitting at my door, like, when are you getting off work? When they're like, go away, mom. I think I want to go get my welding certificate. I want to like, I like have all these like lists of things, like maybe my plumber's license. Like, why not? Like, I'm sure I could figure it out. I don't want to speak Sparky though. Still, I have no desire.
I think that's the secret to success in this industry, though, is just staying curious.
Yes.
Just stay curious, keep learning, and like you're more successful too, I think, when you know a little bit about a ton of things. Like you're talking about, like jack of all, not master of none. But it's like when you, and that's something it's a realization I had after the fact. Is like I know a little bit about a lot. Like I can read an electrical plan. I'm not an electrician by any means, but like you know what I mean. Like I know how one line works, but that's about the extent of that. But at least I can somewhat talk intelligently with an electrician. But I came from other trades and that sort of stuff. So it's kind of it's definitely served me well as to be curious about it all, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. And for me, like so we had to write our I guess statement, like instead of being like, oh, I'm a chemical engineer, like write our statement. And it was, for me, it was like, I want to live an inspired life that inspires others. I want to constantly be inspired to learn more, to do things, to look at, a mechanic and understand, like, how did they figure that out? Like, how does their brain work? I want to be curious enough to understand how things work and dig in. And then I want to be inspired by their stories and how they became where they're at. And then I want to take that and whatever I can do to be inspiring to others. And so that's kind of my one-liner that I had to write for my leadership and engineering course was, I want to live an inspired life where I can inspire others. So
I love that.
Yeah, that's very good. And also too, I also really want to just emphasize the advice that you gave, Kathryn, because I also agree with it that getting a skill, getting some experience physically in what you're going to go into, especially in the engineering world, is just it's so valuable. And when I got into engineering, that helped me out a lot too, was being an electrician first, understanding how it gets built.
Well, and it gave you street credit too. Like street cred, right? Like with the contractors you're trying to manage, for sure.
Big time. And then, actually understanding, like, okay, so you put a line on a drawing, but what does it take to actually get that line there? I mean, it's 2 clicks of a mouse, but it's actually 100 hours worth of work from 3 electricians.
Right.
I mean, it's big difference.
Yes. And that's back to
everything
the
that you don't
fundamentals
draw.
thing. That's back to the fundamentals thing, though, is that people don't understand what it took to get there because we're so easy to bypass the work because technology will do it. Like they're seeing that kids aren't wanting to learn their letters or learn how to read because they have tablets and they can do so much. Like, why would I need to struggle? Because like reading in the English language, I don't know about other language because I can only speak one, is not logical at times, right? Like, yeah. So anyways, back to the fundamentals. Yes.
Great. All right, Matt, you taking us through the game?
Yeah, let's play a little word association game.
All right.
This is Alex's
This is the part that I was a little nervous about because, we don't know where this break goes at times.
It's the only part we can't edit, too, by the way.
It's the only part that typically gets 4-letter expletives. So
I am working out of a Christian radio station right now, so like I gotta be a little easy on that.
All right, first word is change order.
Lack of clarity. That's not one word, but that's the word.
Close enough.
I'll allow it. Judges allow it. Next word is estimate.
Trust but verify.
I like it. GC. The Christian radio sensors just went off.
Yeah. Complicated.
Oh.
Yeah.
OSHA.
Complicated. Necessary.
I think you're the second one that said that. And then BIM.
What?
BIM.
Oh, I heard you. It's on my to-do list to figure this out. It's honestly, I have an engineer who works on my team. She's amazing. Kyle, you've got a chance to work with her. And she's like, that should be in BIM. That should be in BIM. And I'm like, okay, I didn't use BIM. The software we were using when I did the big project was Proctor, and I barely liked it. So I need
BIM's
to.
one of those things, though, that's like, people are getting too reliant on it, right? Talking about the fundamentals. It's like, it's in the BIM model. It's in the BIM model. And like, I've been on projects like, it's drawn in the BIM model. Like, it doesn't work, but it's in the model. Like, okay.
Back to one of our favorite memes, one of our favorite conversations, one of my favorite memes of all time is like this one. I don't know if it's a meme or it's real, but I'm pretty sure it was a meme. It was like that face you make when the owner tells you that it's in the drawings, but then takes 4 days to find where it's at in the drawings or something like that. I was like, that is so true. And I apologize on the behalf of all owners.
Oh yeah.
Well, I think we're at about time here. Kathryn, it's been great having you. Any last bits of advice or anything else you want to plug in or add to before we wrap things up?
No, thank you so much for the opportunity. I really love I really love what you are out there trying to do, which is bring up a new generation and just have the open conversation back to like the older millennial generation. I do think that that's the value we're adding to the world, is not being afraid to have the conversation, even if it's a tough one. And the emotional intelligence to say, I need to talk about this. And in order to talk about it, we got to make it, psychological safety is really important, right? In order to talk about it, we got to have a forum. And so I just think the fact that you guys are doing this is just fantastic. And I really enjoyed listening to it. And I appreciate the collaboration and let me join today. So thank you very much.
Thanks for joining us. We only spent about 20 seconds talking about memes. We'll have you back to spend more time.
Yeah.
Deal.
Appreciate it, Kathryn.
Yeah, thank you so much, and all the listeners out there, don't forget to DM us for any upcoming projects, jobs, opportunities, and connections. Like, follow, share us, and keep up listening and growing.
Hit all the buttons.
Buttons.
See y'all.
Thanks again.
Bye.